So, you might have noticed there's a lot of crazy stuff going around when it comes to Star Wars. The Acolyte was recently canceled. That's always big news when something like that happens in the pop culture zeitgeist. And the reaction to it has been predictable, but also hilarious. But on top of that, there have been some crazy rumors coming out about how this decision was actually made that have made some people just think, oh, well, Kathleen Kennedy's finally done. Let's go. And we're going to attempt to be really respectful and shit in this video. But there are some pretty crazy rumors out there, different people chiming in, insiders and whatnot. I've also heard some stuff behind the scenes. So I think it's time to unquit covering Star Wars again and deliver to you as best I can the truth of this situation with Kathleen Kennedy and the future of Star Wars. So John Rocha, the Outlaw, does a podcast YouTube channel, and I also saw him recently talking on Christian Harloff's YouTube channel. He has this scoop, this thing he's been talking about, where basically he's saying that there was a writer's room assembled for season 2 of Acolyte, and that everybody at Lucasfilm was going to greenlight this thing. They were acting as though it was going to be greenlit. They were ready to go, and then all of a sudden, something changed. Something happened. Somebody came in. Acolyte gone. And if you're not following Star Wars closely, you might be like, why is that even a big deal? Aren't most shows operating as though they will have another season until they are not? And I would say, yes, that is normally how things work. However, you must understand Lucasfilm doesn't act like a normal company. A lot of people, including myself, have been absolutely shocked at how Lucasfilm has been able to just continue to operate with failing strategies almost across the board for years with seemingly no consequence or any kind of referendum by anybody. God damn it. And I think for certain Star Wars fans, this is just like a hard line that you cannot cross because some of you, for some reason, still just don't see it. You don't see how bad Lucasfilm has become. What a failure Kathleen Kennedy has been. How the Star Wars brand and IP has shown diminishing returns over and over again to the point where it's borderline Star Trek. And I know a certain amount of this is subjective, right? Do you like the shows or not? That's up to you. But I think a lot of this stuff is not subjective. I think you can look at various points and just see in plain fucking sight how Star Wars has been a failure. The Star Wars Hotel, the diminishing viewership of even great Star Wars shows like The Mandalorian and whatever the they did with the 3rd season. Anyway, the way that things are, the way that the fan base is divided, I'm either preaching to the choir here or I'm talking to people that will just literally never get it. So we're just going to move on. But the whole point of this story, why I'm bringing it up, why I'm making this video is because what John Rocha is reporting is that for the first time in a long time, it feels like somebody actually came into Lucasfilm and stopped them from just doing the stuff that they have been doing, mainly making poor decisions in the green lighting process, poor decisions in the pre-production process. I mean, frankly, they've been making poor decisions pretty much across the board. And so it frankly feels like a breath of fresh air that somebody came in and was like, no, we're not going to make a second season for the worst performing Star Wars show ever. Kathleen Kennedy, I didn't even think that was possible. I didn't think it was worse than Andor. How could it be worse than Andor? For the record, of course, it's way worse than Andor. I mean, there's a lot of different statistics that you can look at out there, but dude, trust me, this show's abysmal. It performed so bad, dude, so bad. But anyway, the point is that kind of leads into this big wider narrative about Kathleen Kennedy, about the future of Lucasfilm, because there have been so many people calling for her to step down, be fired, or retire. And while I acknowledge that a lot of the voices calling for these different things are loud and kind of obnoxious and maybe just honestly not the best kind of dudes, the fact remains that she's terrible, dude. She needs out of there. We need this bitch out of there. And so the Acolyte getting canceled and the story by Rocha brings up this question. Is Kathleen Kennedy finally being removed from Lucasfilm? Is that actually happening? And in an interesting turn of events, the co-host of the Hot Mic podcast, Jeff Snyder, reported on his newsletter that Kathleen Kennedy was not leaving, at least anytime soon. However, what's interesting about it is Jeff says she's going to remain as president at least until Q2 of next year, which is still pretty close. And in fact, that actually perfectly lines up with Star Wars Celebration Japan. And I also think it's important to note that Jeff Snyder is not saying that Kathleen Kennedy's contract is going to be extended. It just seems like she'll just remain as president, technically not under contract, until at least Q2 of 2025, which again lines up with Star Wars Celebration Japan. And I have been told behind the scenes that she's done, but to be honest with you guys, I've been hearing that for years. And I think a lot of people have been hearing that for years. I think going all the way back to the crazy live stream that Grace Randolph did way back in the day, where she was basically talking about how they wanted her out, but nobody wanted that job. I kind of feel like that's what the situation is. Like, there's just nobody really good to run Lucasfilm. They don't necessarily think anybody internally has the full gambit of skills that would be required to run the company, and they don't necessarily think an outside force would understand the Star Wars brand. And I think Grace was probably right back then. I know a lot of you are going to be like, ah! But I do. I think she was right then, and I think that's kind of been the story of Lucasfilm, is like, nobody really knows how to run that company. Star Wars is kind of a difficult brand to crack with a very intense fan base that is quite divided. And in fact, just recently we had Chris Gore come out and say that he has heard that Kathleen Kennedy absolutely wants out. She wants out of Lucasfilm, but she wants to go out on a win. And so if you go with me, honestly, put all of these stories together, right? Because there's this other interesting element here where Jeff is talking about how there's a lot of shows in production that have not been talked about when it comes to Lucasfilm. And so what I think is going on is this. What Kathleen Kennedy wants to go out on is probably the Mandalorian and Grogu movie. And so I think right now, Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm, they do know that she's going to be exiting the company. I think they also know who will be brought in to replace her, although I have no idea who that could be. But I think what Kathy's doing right now is setting things in motion to kind of try to set up a legacy of content. And then she wants to go out on a win with Mandalorian and Grogu, which I think will be a huge focus of Star Wars Celebration Japan. And it's even possible that off of the sort of hype of that movie, she announces that John and Dave are now taking over Star Wars completely, or something like that, right? Announcing a passing of the baton. So that's what I think will be happening at Star Wars Celebration Japan next year. That's why Jeff said Q2 of 2025. Again, this is my speculation, although I think it's spot on. I have to just tell you, it's speculation, right? I haven't been directly told this by anybody. And perhaps this new suite of shows is stuff that was greenlit by Kathy, and she wants to just set up a bunch of stuff that's epic and try to just make an exit and pass the baton to somebody internal, because I think Kathy really does care about her legacy. As crazy as that is, because I think most people would just say, look, that's fine, you know, and as a lady, I respect her, and she produced E.T., and that's great, but she sucked running Star Wars. I just don't have a lot of sympathy for it. It's like, look, again, as a person, cool, like, you know, she's probably a good mom and shit, whatever. But dude, she was the president of Lucasfilm. But basically, I believe Chris Gore, and I believe a lot of the reporting that suggests that she wants legacy to be important. She wants to go out on some whims. And as much as I think she has done an absolutely terrible job, not everything she has done has been a failure. Some of the stuff with John and Dave has been really good. But overall, you just got to give her a failing score. It's been really bad for Star Wars as a brand. And it's interesting to watch this time period where Marvel Studios is making this big turnaround and things seem to be going really well. A lot of fans embracing the changes, embracing the sort of new MCU, which really feels like the old MCU because they're going back to a lot of the legacy actors. And a lot of fans have been wondering, like, is something like that going to happen to Lucasfilm? Well, I think the closest thing we're going to get to that will be this sort of passing of the baton to a new president and perhaps just a new vision for Star Wars. And I do think that's coming sooner rather than later. I believe that will happen in Q2 of next year, maybe at Star Wars Celebration itself. And so I really do feel as though Kathy's time is finally at an end. That could be why The Acolyte was canceled, despite her wanting it to continue. They might be phasing her out of control, but I still believe they're going to give her sort of optics to make it look good, to try to keep her legacy intact for what it is. But there you have it, guys. Bunch of updates and my thoughts on what's actually going on with Kathleen Kennedy and Star Wars. I guess it's really going to depend on who the new president is, how far they pivot things into a new direction. Star Wars is great, but Star Wars is in terrible shape, so it would take a lot of work to turn the Star Wars brand around, in my opinion. But I'd love to know what you think. Let me know in the comment section below. And as I always say, I hope you are having an awesome and a nerdy day, and I'll see you in the next video.